We all know plants make their own food, right? But what happens after that food is made? I mean, how do they actually use it? Well, today we're going to dive into the secret life of sugar and uncover something pretty amazing, how plants breathe to power their entire lives.
So yeah, photosynthesis. Plants make sugar. We get it. But have you ever really thought about this? What about the roots, buried deep in the dark? They can't see the sun. Or what about at night? The whole plant can't just, shut down when the sun goes down. That's the puzzle. And that's exactly what we're going to piece together today.
Okay, so the answer to that big puzzle, it all comes down to a process called cellular respiration. And look, this isn't about breathing in and out like we do. No, no. This is happening at the tiniest cellular level. It's how every living thing, from a microbe to a giant redwood to you and me, unlocks the energy that's stored in food. The whole point is to take that stored energy and convert it into something the cell can actually spend. Think of it like the cell's cash, and it's called ATP. All right, before we get into the nitty-gritty chemistry, let's just zoom out for a second. To really get why respiration is so important for a plant, we first have to understand the unique energy problem it's constantly trying to solve. And here's the problem in a nutshell. Think of a plant like a big company. You've got your factories, the green leaves, pumping out all the product, which in this case is sugar. But you've also got offices, a shipping department, a foundation, all these other parts, right? The roots, the stem, the flowers, they all need energy to do their jobs, but they can't make their own. So the plant has this massive logistics challenge. It has to ship that sugar everywhere it's needed. And then, once the sugar arrives, every single one of those cells needs the right machinery to actually use it. And that machinery, that's cellular respiration. Okay, so let's get microscopic. We're going to follow the journey of just one single molecule of glucose, our hero. And Act 1 of its story is a process so ancient, so fundamental, that it happens in pretty much every living thing on Earth. It's called glycolysis, and the name says it all. It literally means sugar splitting. So picture this. Here's our glucose molecule, just hanging out in the cytoplasm. That's kind of the main jelly-like substance inside the cell. This little molecule is just packed with potential energy, but it's all locked up tight. Glycolysis is the very first key that's going to start to unlock that treasure chest. The best way to think about this is like starting a tiny business. First, you have the investment phase. You got to spend a little to make a little, right? The cell invests 2 of those ATP energy coins to get the process rolling. Then, bam, the split. That 6-carbon glucose molecule gets chopped right in half into 2 3-carbon molecules. And then, the best part, the payoff phase. The cell gets a return of 4 ATP, so we're already in profit. Plus, and this is super important for later, it captures some really high-energy electrons and sticks them on a little shuttle bus called NADH. Just remember that name, NADH. It's going to be a big deal. So let's do the math. We spent 2 ATP, we made 4. That's a net profit of 2 ATP. Now, look, that's not a ton of energy. It's not going to power a whole tree. But here's the thing, it's fast. And crucially, it doesn't need any oxygen at all. This is why it's the universal first step. It's the ancient, quick and dirty way to get a little bit of energy, and basically all life knows how to do it. That little bit of profit is nice. A good start. But the vast majority of the energy is still trapped inside those 2 smaller molecules we made. So what happens next? Well, the cell reaches a critical crossroads, and the direction it takes depends entirely on one single question. Is there any oxygen around? This is a huge fork in the road. And this slide lays out the 2 paths perfectly. On one side, if there's no oxygen, the cell's kind of stuck. It has to go down the road of anaerobic fermentation. It's an inefficient dead end, really. The whole process stays in the cytoplasm, and you get 0 extra ATP. Bummer. But if oxygen is present, oh man, it's a completely different story. The cell switches to the supercharged high-efficiency pathway, aerobic respiration. The whole operation moves into a special power plant organelle called the mitochondria. And get this, the energy payoff is going to be massive. And this quote really drives the point home, doesn't it? Fermentation, it releases less than 7% of the energy in that glucose molecule. Think about that. That means over 93% of the potential energy is just thrown away in the waste products. You just can't run a complex organism like a plant on that kind of inefficiency. You need a way better system. So let's assume our plant cell is smart, it has oxygen, and it takes the efficient path. Those pyruvic acid molecules get a ticket to ride into the cell's true powerhouse. For Act 2 of our story, the Krebs cycle. And here we are. Welcome to the mitochondria.
If the cytoplasm was just the local workshop where we did the first rough split, this is the high-tech industrial power plant. This is where that fuel is going to be completely and systematically taken apart to squeeze out every last drop of energy. Okay, the Krebs cycle can look super intimidating, like a crazy chemistry diagram. But don't worry about the details. Its job is actually pretty straightforward. It takes our fuel, and in a series of steps, it just rips it apart, piece by piece. The carbon atoms get released as CO2. That's literally the exhale part of the plant's breathing. But here's the most important part, the real goal of this whole cycle. It's not to make a lot of ATP directly. Nope. The real prize is to harvest all those high-energy electrons we talked about and load them onto our shuttle buses, NADH and its buddy FADH2. It's all about loading up those shuttles. So let's recap. After all that, we've only made a tiny handful of usable ATP. But what we have done is load up all of our energy shuttles, NADH and FADH2, with tons of potential energy. And now we've reached the moment we've been waiting for, the grand finale. This is where the cell is finally going to cash in all of its chips. And this epic final stage is called the electron transport system. The best way to picture it is like a giant energy waterfall or cascade. Our shuttle buses, NADH and FADH2, pull up to the top and drop off their precious cargo, those high-energy electrons. The electrons are then passed down a chain of proteins, like water tumbling from one rock to the next. And every time they drop down a level, they release a little burst of energy. The cell cleverly uses that energy to pump a bunch of protons to one side of a membrane, building up a huge amount of pressure. And then, all those protons come rushing back through this incredible molecular turbine, this little spinning machine called ATP synthase. And as they do, cha-ching, 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 it churns out massive amounts of ATP. But what keeps this whole amazing waterfall flowing? I mean, why don't the electrons just get to the bottom and cause a big traffic jam? Well, this is where oxygen has its starring role. Oxygen is the ultimate cleanup crew. It's sitting right there at the very bottom of the cascade, waiting patiently, and its job is to grab those used-up low-energy electrons. It scoops them up, combines them with some protons, and makes water. That's it. Without oxygen there to clear the way, the whole assembly line would back up and grind to a complete halt. And so, the final tally? The big payoff for all this incredible, intricate machinery? From just one single molecule of glucose, this whole aerobic pathway generates somewhere around 36 ATP. 36! Now compare that to the pathetic 2 you get from fermentation. 2 versus 36. This massive difference in efficiency, this is what makes complex life possible. This is what allows a tiny seed to grow into a giant tree. Okay, let's pull back and look at the big picture again. We've just walked through this amazing demolition process, right? Tearing down sugar to release energy. But, believe it or not, that's only half the story. You see, we tend to think of respiration as a purely catabolic process. That's just a fancy word for breaking things down, demolition. But the cell is way, way smarter and more efficient than that. It's not just a demolition site, it's also a construction site. And that's why scientists now call this an amphibolic pathway. Amphi just means both. Think about it. As the cell is breaking down the glucose, it creates all these different intermediate molecules along the way. Well, the cell can just reach in at any point in the cycle, pull out one of those pieces, and use it as a building block for something else entirely. It can use them to build amino acids or fatty acids, whatever it needs. It's like a central hub, a hardware store for the cell that works for both demolition and construction projects. And this brings us to one last, really amazing thought. This whole intricate process we just walked through, glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, that electron waterfall, it is fundamentally the same in the root of a plant, in a speck of yeast making bread, and inside every single cell in your body right now. It's a shared blueprint, a metabolic heritage that connects us all. So the question I want to leave you with is this. What does the fact that we all use this same universal blueprint for energy tell us about the deep, ancient, and truly shared story of all life on this planet?